I tell every client is that growth is like flipping cards in a deck, and you're looking for aces. And so it's like, well, here we go. Let's flip, and eventually you find an ace. I can guarantee that, with my experience with all the different companies I've worked with, I don't work with a company where I can't guarantee the first two cards are aces. And so, like, very, very easily within 30 minutes of an audit, I usually see 20 to 30% gains in CAC and ROAS, like right out of the gate, just from spending 30 minutes in the company's growth stack.
Hello, I'm Peggy Ann Saltz. This is Mobile Groove, where we go beyond the buzzwords and we focus on bold conversations with brightest and sharpest minds in mobile apps and AI. And that brings me to today's guest, because yes, I speak with a lot of people over the year, but I have a special guest because he has a bold voice, he has a long track record, and I've interviewed him, as I said, many times over the years. Thomas Hopkins, a former mobile hero. Yes, that's when we met. Standout growth marketer today. And you have done a lot. You've helped scale MasterClass from Series B to D. You've led passenger acquisition at Lyft ahead of an IPO. And now his own consultancy, growth consultancy, no surprise, GrowthOps, with a different approach, because again, boldly challenging conventional thinking out there, this time about attribution, effectiveness, and interestingly, what it takes to grow in B2B, an area we haven't been looking at enough. Thomas, you're doing it. So yes, great to have you, first of all. And first time we recorded, you were in a trailer, but you're not now. What happened to the trailer?
Yeah, the trailer, I actually just sold it 2 weeks ago. I know we had planned to potentially do a sequel.
Yes.
But yeah.
But it lives on in our memory, and the impact wasn't just your average interview. It sparked company-wide PR training at MasterClass. I don't think this will do the same with your own company, but let's start there for people who weren't there. It was a moment. How did one scrappy podcast just change the rules at MasterClass?
Yeah, so funny. We obviously connected, and then I think it was at a conference, and it was like, oh, hey, we got to get you on a podcast. And so we connected, we got on a podcast, and it was about MasterClass and the way that we were doing retention and how we were doing, lifecycle marketing there. And at that time, I just had my son, and my son was about, 6 months old. And whenever he heard my voice or saw me, he would cry or yell. And so I moved out of the house. I started working out of a trailer in my driveway. And so in the podcast, I took the call in the trailer. And so that ended up being a podcast that ended up being featured on Forbes. And it's so funny because then, the MasterClass team was like, hey, what's going on with this? And so then they had to launch this whole new thing. We're like, hey, anytime you want to speak, anytime you want to be representing MasterClass, you need to get training before you actually go and do it.
Well, you were indeed the real deal. And that's what I like about you, Thomas, throughout the years. So let's fast forward. You've gone through lifecycle marketing at MasterClass. You were one of the very first to actually be talking about retention as a strategy. And now we're looking at full-on growth methodology, and one that people don't look at very often. It's a shift to focus on B2B. B2C is usually where everyone is at. How do I get the consumers? But you have a different approach. What inspired this shift, and how did this journey take shape?
Yeah. So what I found was that I headed up growth at Lyft and MasterClass, passengers at Lyft, and then MasterClass doing growth and lifecycle. And what I basically found was that anything that's more of a considered purchase. So whenever you have to think about something for a little bit, you don't just, buy it immediately, right? So for anything outside of e-commerce, right? So if I'm buying a women's hair product or a lotion or a laundry detergent, like I can see an ad and I make a decision within a day or two. But whenever you have anything that's a subscription, anything that's a higher ticket price, whether it's a B2B SaaS product you're going to sign up for and start using, or a new app that requires monthly subscription, you kind of think about it for a little while. And the best example I have for this for anyone is thinking about this, like, when was the last time you bought a car? Well, you bought a car, let's say last year, but you were looking at cars for the entire year before that. You might show up to dealerships, you might try different cars, you're researching it, you're looking at it, but we as advertisers aren't actually looking at data until somebody gives us their email address, until somebody like comes to our site and we're able to cookie them, and or they download an app. And the issue with that is there's so much that happens before that we as advertisers aren't taking into account, even with all the other measurement types, media mix models, and it doesn't capture that. So I got into this because into B2B because it just happened out of referrals. I started working with different companies as a growth consultant, and started my agency consultancy. And what I basically started to realize was that the companies with any consideration that was more than a couple of weeks, the models that we have for attribution and the systems we have for analytics were not working. And so I had to basically say, well, what system do we have that we can build that makes it so we can actually better understand which channels are doing well for us and we should invest more into. And so it came out of a need of the clients that I was helping to grow.
That consideration phase, that's, first of all, it's key. It's going to decide actions. It's going to signal intent. It tells us a lot, but you're right. There's no way of looking into it. And you also said that, the tools we rely on only tell us around 5% of the story. So that blind spot, that affects decisions across the funnel.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like we talked about the car example, like we start to look at the data right when somebody comes into the dealership, and we get their phone number and their email address, and we create a profile for them. And the same thing's true for any B2B product. And there's so much that happens before that. I just recently came across this. This is an exact example of this on Facebook. If everyone remembers marketing on Facebook or on Meta pre 2019, they had this product called Atlas, which was a multi-touch attribution system that would show you, hey, these 4 ads contributed to this one purchase or this one lead. And what that meant is this ad got shown as a video, to this person, they engaged with it. This ad they clicked on, this ad they clicked on, and then this ad they viewed and then they converted. They don't have Atlas anymore. They don't give that data to us. And so what we know is that every user is seeing multiple ads before they actually convert. Now, the problem with Meta, the problem with Google is they don't split the attribution between multiple, views or multiple impressions or multiple ads. So what happens is you show 5 ads to one person, and let's say they're 5 different ads. Only one of those ads gets credit for that one purchase. That's not a clear picture of what happened at all. That's 0 picture. So what happens is you go, okay, these 4 ads aren't working. This one ad is. You turn off those 4 ads, and then now your business starts to do worse. You're like, what's going on? We kept the one good ad. What's happening here? The reality is what's happening is you're looking at bad data because you're looking at data that says this attribution or this purchase was because of this one ad. When the reality is this purchase was because of those 4 impressions, and those first 3 ads did a good job, but that last ad got the conversion because it got the last click. Whereas those other 2, whether they got clicks or they got engagement that made somebody aware of the product, they don't get any credit for it. So we have an attribution problem, and that's, I'm seeing this with, every company, even if you're an e-commerce company, like, because we don't have that multi-touch system, it makes it very confusing to know like where the value is at the ad level.
If you think about this is pretty seismic, Thomas, because, we optimize to what we think is the winning ad. And what you're saying is, that winning ad isn't the winning ad because there were others that triggered or deepened that intent that are just as important, and we're not seeing them. We're 100%. Not considering our consideration ads.
No, we're not. And in any, this goes back to like marketing, from business school or marketing from, understand brand marketing, right? Like you first have to make somebody aware, and then they have to move into consideration, and then they have to then move into deeper consideration, and then they have to convert. And so, there are ads that will do much better at making people become aware of your brand than ads that are going to do well at getting them to convert. If you try to show somebody an ad that's going to get them to convert before they actually are even aware of even, the company, there's no way that's going to work. And so there's the system that, I just recently, started using and talking with is there are people that are not problem aware. There are people that are problem aware. And then there are people that are solution aware. And as you go down the funnel, if you're advertising only with ads that are like conversion focused, then you're only really advertising to the people that are solution aware. It's like, hey, I need to lose weight. Okay, that's problem aware. If they don't feel like they need to lose weight, then they're not even problem aware. And so then you need to actually have ads that are showing people like, hey, you should lose weight. And then when people are realize like, hey, I should lose weight, then they need to know what why they need to lose weight. And then the last piece is like, oh, these are the different ways that you could lose weight. And so those are all different levels of like the awareness consideration down to conversion funnel. And each ad is doing a different job in that funnel. And it's super important to have ads that are doing all, each one of those steps rather than just saying, we're just going to focus on one at the bottom of the funnel. A great example of bottom of the funnel is like just a comparison ad. Hey, you know about this company. What about this company? Or, hey, this is what you normally eat, or this is what you normally do. Why don't you do this? And they go, oh, cool. Because they're already solution aware. And now they just need to know that there's a better solution for the solution that they're currently using for their problem.
And this all comes back to what you're doing at GrowthOps. So what is your approach? We chatted about it, and I'd like you to unpack that because it's very effective. We'll get to some examples. Growth doubled year over year. That's not a small increase. That's a leap. But how do you do it?
Yeah. So we use surveys. It's nothing sexy. It's nothing like, oh, wow. But the way to do it is super important, and how you execute on super. So if you have a brand that every brand has certain level of awareness, consideration, and obviously conversions that happen every single month. We've all heard of brand trackers, right? And brand trackers give us an idea of, what a brand tracker is you survey audience and that you ask the audience, have you heard of this brand? Or when you think of this product, which brands do you think of, right? So that's unaided awareness. Whereas aided awareness is when have you heard of these brands? And you click the boxes that you've heard of, and that's aided awareness. And then consideration is questions like, have you considered using this product or for this specific use case? And so that's consideration. And then if they the next question after that is, if you didn't consider them, or if you did consider them and you chose not to use them, why was it? And then you have, question answers for that, and that people can select. And by doing this, what you can do is you can start to survey the audience by running ads on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok. And you get a general sense of what is our awareness in the market for our company, aided, unaided. What is our consideration for our product? And then as compared to competitors. And then also for people that have considered but then not converted, why they're not converting. And what that's giving you is that view of that 90%, 95% of the funnel that normally you don't have visibility into. So you get the sense for what is happening on the awareness level, what's happening on the consideration level, what's happening on the conversion level. And that gives you a more clear picture as to where the opportunities are.
And that's also giving you an idea through the data and how you do the model. And I'm assuming, there's AI, there's modeling there. You can also then pinpoint ads that are effective or changes that need to be made in the advertising in order to match, again, sort of that funnel map. Is that how this works? Because it's one thing to get the input, it's another thing to execute on top of it.
Yeah, I'll give an example. You're totally right. So when you're growing a company, whether it's a B2B product, B2B is any SaaS product out there. That's usually the clients that we end up working with, whether it's a B2B2C product or a pure B2B product. But what you basically, when you're advertising, you're running on Facebook, you're running on Instagram, you're running on TikTok, you're running on YouTube, you're running TV ads, podcasts, and the question's always like, where's the best ROI? And where should we spend more? What should our media mix be? How do we lower CAC, increase scale? The hard part is that when you're looking at that and you're only looking at the bottom part of the funnel, you don't actually know what the impact of these channels are really having on the other metrics of awareness consideration. So you might think, oh, we have an awareness problem, or, oh, we have a consideration problem. And what does that mean? Well, if you have an awareness problem, that means we need to reach more net new people, right? We need to get our name out there to more people. If you have a consideration problem, that means actually people know about us. Our target customer, ICP, knows about us, but they aren't considering us for some reason. And then for the some reason is, that's the conversion. Hey, we have great awareness and we have great consideration, but people aren't choosing us. Well, why? And so if you can get the answers for each of these and see how you actually rank compared to your competitors in the same space, you can tell, do I have an awareness problem? Does that means I need to get more reach out there? I got to spend more on media and just like get more people to know about us. Do I have a consideration problem? What, compared to our competitors across different, verticals, is it that people aren't considering us because they don't think it's for them, right? They're like, oh no, I know about that company. We have great awareness, but that's actually not a company that I would consider using for this specific use case. And then, or do we have a conversion problem, which is more of, hey, this is the reason why people aren't converting in this vertical.
Do you find, Thomas, that companies actually know where they have the problem, or do they need help to even just pinpoint that?
The answer is you hear a lot of companies talk about creative fatigue. You hear a lot of companies talk about more creative, more volume, more models, more hooks, more concepts, right? And being great at creative, because that's going to be what allows you to scale. Yes, but that's a lot like throwing darts at a board where you're blindfolded. You're just like, I'm going to take a lot of darts, I'm going to throw them at the board and hope I end up hitting a bullseye, and find that audience that's going to, find that creative, that influencer, that, concept, that messaging that's going to work really well. That is one method you can do. It can be very expensive and you could hit it or you could not. And you could spend 6 months, you could spend a year until you find a message, a concept, a model that works. What this does is it actually says, you know what? Instead of just throwing darts at the board and spending a bunch of money on creative every single week, working with different, a lot of work, right, to produce content, let's actually figure out exactly what content we should produce and go and just produce that. And so you can take a creative budget that might be something along the lines of like 30, 40, 50 grand a month and say, bring it down to 10 grand a month, because you pick the exact concept, targeting the exact vertical that you need to go after, and with the perfect messaging that's going to either move people from awareness consideration or consideration to conversion, because it's tackling the exact thing that we see that we're actually missing on for that ICP. When you say, like, do companies really know? The answer is no, they don't actually know. And then they all of a sudden have a creative that hits and they go, oh my gosh, maybe this hit because it's hitting a different demographic, or maybe this hit because it's this person. And they don't actually even know at that point. It gives them a little bit of light into seeing, oh, maybe we were missing that audience, or we were. And so then they start to iterate on that. And so it's a lot like, being blindfolded and throwing darts at a board, or, being blindfolded and walking around, like trying to find your way through a maze. Whereas, doing this survey data in order to understand where your gaps are in awareness, consideration, and conversion, you can quickly like zoom out, look at the maze and be like, we need to go this way, and we'll quickly get to the finish line.
That's fantastic, because it's not just about like the demographics and the audience. Those are also very important points. But what you're bringing into here is the other variable, which is, where are you? What stage are you at? And that's not just data. That's something that marketers are missing, because, as you told me in prep yourself, it's not an awareness problem. I almost want to have a t-shirt like this. It's not an awareness problem. It's not even a consideration problem. It's perception. That's solid. That is on the mark. But for our audience, what did you mean by that?
I have a company that I work with that I did this for, that's in, the beauty industry, that provides software for scheduling and payment processing for beauty professionals. And essentially, the thought was, hey, we have an awareness problem in all these different verticals. We do well in these verticals, but we don't do as well in these in terms of volume. Why is that? Oh, we just need to advertise more to them. We need to reach them more.
Mm-hmm.
And we did the analysis. We did we built the tracker, built the survey, and ran it. And basically the data that came back showed us that we didn't have an awareness problem. Our awareness was actually great in all verticals. We didn't have, what we had was a consideration and perception problem. And so not in all verticals though, only in some of the verticals. And so what was that? Well, what it was, hey, I know of you guys. I have considered you, but I chose not to use you because I didn't think you were for my vertical. And when I say vertical, I mean, in the beauty space, you have hair, you have nails, you have estheticians, you have all different med spas, etc. Right. And so some verticals were like, I just didn't think this was for you. This app was for me. I thought it was for that. So in a way, exactly what we had was we had a brand perception problem. And because the product was built for every beauty professional, it's built for whatever industry you're in. But because they were doing so well in certain industries or certain verticals, they were being, the thought was that it wasn't for them if they weren't in that industry. Wow. And so by getting this data, it was like, that's so obvious. What do we need to do? Well, we need to have ads that we run to the same people that are in these other verticals that are from influencers, from UGC creators that are talking about how they use this product and how it's helping their business. And just by doing that, immediately you see brand perception change. You see that those verticals start to take off, and you see like just massive growth that you hadn't had before. But it's because they already had the awareness. And usually awareness is the most annoying thing to build. But what my argument is, if you've been advertising on Facebook, Google, TikTok, you likely have more awareness than you realize. And you're just not getting the conversion rates that you should, because you're not hitting the right verticals with the right type of messaging in order to have that. And what we're doing here is just saying, here are the verticals that actually need the right messaging, and let's create that and go after it. And then you see the difference. The cool part about this is, in my opinion, so I just started talking to a company in B2C in the education space, and there's no reason why we can't do this in B2C and B2B, where the difference is in B2C, it's not about what verticals are we missing on, right? Like customer types. It's actually what user demographics are we missing on. So for education, right? You have, when we were in school, there was the jocks, the nerds, the skater kids, the druggies, right? Like it was like those were the demographic, or those were like the people, the groups. And then, but today the Gen Zs, like there's so many different, like there's the creator, there's the the side hustle, like the entrepreneur that's like super young, the crypto trader, like at a very young age, you have all these different demographics. Well, are you reaching them with your ads? Are you speaking to them by having the right model, by having the right content? And if you do surveys like this, you could actually figure out, oh my God, we're doing amazingly well with this demographic, but we're not doing well with this demographic. Let's go get creators in this demographic, or models that act like they're a creator in this demographic, get content from them, and let's actually go run them in our paid channels. And in my opinion, you're going to see huge impact, just like we did with the product that I worked with.
So it's about surveys. And then, the devil's advocate in my mind says, well, how are we getting insights that are actionable? How are you approaching that?
Yeah, it's super important to be segmenting your questions properly. So if you're building a survey and you don't ask the right questions, or you ask questions that are biased, then you can get wrong data back. So survey setup is super important. But then the other piece is making sure that after you have the data, you analyze it and segment it right. And so look at it by vertical, look at it by the answers the users gave, and then make sure you're getting enough answers where you have statistically significant results to then say, wow, there's an opportunity here. And so where the opportunity is super obvious. Like when you have a data scientist that's good, it's like, here's the opportunity. It's super easy. So when you see a difference in trend for like, hey, our awareness was the same as all of them for these verticals, our consideration is actually not the same for all compared to our competitors. Our consideration is much lower for these 5 verticals. Then you dig into the data and say why, and then it's very easy to go, oh my gosh, we should change our creative for this to attack this specific thing. But it also, what it does is it actually can give you product marketing information for which features do we need to do a better job of like really populating when somebody says they're coming for this purpose. So if somebody says they're from this vertical or they're using the app for this use case, then that means that we need to make sure we populate this specific feature earlier.
And this is really important when you think about some of the apps, they add features. How do they tell you that they have them? I mean, how do they bring this out, and how do they know which ones to focus on? So this gets into the creative, the campaign planning, but as well the product.
I'm working with a client right now on that exact thing, actually, and it has to do with AI. And so the question is, right, how do product marketers work? How do product managers work, right? What do? Is they survey the audience of their users. They ask them, hey, what would you like to see in our product? And then they analyze all the other competitors, what they have. But then they're also saying, well, actually, we'd be interested to know what the general market wants in terms of AI features built into the apps. And so what we're working on right now is basically a survey to understand what the overall industry is looking for in terms of product features that are, using AI to better improve their business. Wow. And so that's an example where we're using that to better inform what product they should be building.
It sounds to me as if there's a new playbook forming right now as you build this approach.
Yeah, there definitely is. And I am still grappling with exactly what that is. But if I were to say, I'm probably about 80% of the way there. And what that 80% of the way there is that in every, once you have the data, right, and you identify what the issue is, then that issue is most of the time it is a consideration or perception problem. And then the answer is how do you fix a consideration or perception problem?
Yeah.
And that answer, like I said, I'm 80% of the way there. It is with influencers and UGC creators that are speaking to the people that you are missing on consideration or missing on conversion or perception. And it's super important to make sure that it's very authentic. And so it doesn't feel scripted at all. But the most important piece, I said I'm 80% of the way there, is the person, the message, and like authenticity of that. So who are you choosing is wildly important. And that's why, like, when I say throwing darts at the board is super, it's not advised, because you could say, hey, we tried gamers. We tried somebody in the nail space. We tried somebody in the hair space. And it didn't work. Well, you could have just missed on the actual person you chose, or the authenticity of them, or the message they were actually saying. And so you need to know the message, and you need to know the vertical, or you need to know the message, and you need to know the user demographic or persona you're going after that you know that you're missing on. And then you can get the right person to be authentic. The formula is identify the problem, and then now that you've identified the problem, you have conviction about it, and you can be intentional about who you choose to speak to that problem and why this product is the solution for that problem.
How do you guide companies, working with you, engaging with you? How far do you go into closing that loop with them?
Yeah. So right now, with my brother and a former MasterClass employee that worked with me, we started a company called What Buzz Does, as like a company that we're offering this service to different companies. But and like in any B2B product, right, it takes time to get the idea out there. Nobody's doing this, or like, what is this? I don't understand it. Like, are you an attribution company? Yeah. It's like, are you an attribution company? Are you a lifecycle company? What are you doing? I'm like, no, it's something different. And they're like, are you a brand tracker? Or like, not really. We're like a company that helps you understand where your misses are on creative, so you can like push into there further. But I don't know, maybe an impact company. I don't know. So I will say we just started getting that out there. Whatbuzzdoes.com. And I'd say what buzz does, because your product has buzz, and what does it do for you? Well, let's actually analyze it and show what it could do for you with the right type of buzz. My main thing that I work on is growth consulting. So when I have a company that I'm like, it makes sense for you guys to do this, then I'll work with them and say like, hey, you guys should hire my agency. We'll go and build the survey, build the the whole system for you, and launch it. So it's a product that I think could be like a full stack, like amazing product, but any B2B product takes a little while to get it out there, especially when it's something that's new and fringe that people aren't doing yet.
So let's talk a little bit about how you work, because I think this is pretty cool. You talk about having a Navy SEAL team. You parachute in to fix what's broken. That sounds like, hey, help me. I have this problem. Here they come. They're going to do it. It's a little bit of Navy SEAL team sounds really cool. I can see it. What is it in practice, and why does it work better than your usual, retainer models, your agency models? This is different.
A company will come to me and say, hey, we're having a CAC problem, or hey, we're having a growth problem. We were growing 10% a year. Now we stopped. You're growing 40% a year. We're not growing anymore. And CAC looks like it's going through the roof. Or Facebook used to work really well for us. Now it doesn't. And we don't know what's going on. The problem with that is, right, you can't just hire an agency. You can't just hire one person that understands something, like one channel well. You need a group of people that can analyze all the factors of the engine, the growth engine, and say like, here's where you're missing. You've got this part that's old. This part needs to be replaced. This part needs to be changed. And so we come in, and within a month, usually within a week, actually, just the audit, we'll do an audit. And what that audit is, it'll show, here are the things you need to change in your marketing systems, your MarTech, which is like all the things, all of your connections to your ad platforms, your creative, your account structure. And with those 4 things, and obviously your measurement, with those 5 things, we can say, here's what you actually need to do. Here's a playbook. And what I tell every client is that growth is like flipping cards in a deck, and you're looking for aces. And so it's like, well, here we go. Let's flip, and eventually find an ace. I can guarantee that, with my experience with all the different companies I've worked with, I don't work with a company where I can't guarantee the first 2 cards are aces. And so like very, very easily within 30 minutes of an audit, I usually see 20 to 30% gains in CAC and ROAS, like right out of the gate, just from spending 30 minutes in the company's growth stack. And it's usually a MarTech issue, and it's usually a marketing measurement issue. And so that's how like immediately we make an impact. And then we say, here's the roadmap. Here's what we need to change. We start to do those. The company sees the impact, and they go, wow, this is amazing. Let's keep going. And that's how we work with companies.
I'm blown away that you can see that within the first few minutes of your audit. That alone, just the audit alone, I think, Thomas, is what people would go in for.
Yeah, I will tell you, that's the most fun part, right? It's almost like getting picked for a team. I used to, I know we go back, but I used to play professional water polo, and I played on the national team for the U.S. And it's a lot like, the game is tied, and you're in the 4th quarter, and there's a couple minutes left on the clock, and you get hired to go in and say, hey, here's the ball, you go make it happen. I'm like, oh, okay, like, let's do it. So when you get hired, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of opportunity to win, but it is a lot of pressure. But I love that. It's the extension of, playing. It's like being the player and the coach all at the same time. It's like, go make it happen. I love that.
So let's say someone gets in touch with you, a founder calls you, and maybe from a trailer like the one you had, a little scrappy, burnt out on bad attribution, tired of guessing, tired of throwing the darts at the board, as you said. What is the one mindset shift or the move that you want them to make that will change that and change it significantly?
Yeah, that one's very easy. 9 out of 10 companies. Yeah.
Really hard. Okay. Very easy. Excellent.
Very easy. This one's so easy. And okay. I haven't put my finger on why this is something that's so hard for companies to change. But I'll take a guess at what I think it is, but 9 out of 10 times they're looking at the wrong data. And what do I mean by that? They're looking at click-based data, or they're even looking at media mix model data. And the problem with that is it's only 2 views, and every channel is going to be better to use a different attribution type for a different channel. So what does that mean? What ends up happening? You're putting your money and your efforts and your time and your people into the wrong channels, into the wrong place. And so you're looking here and focusing here, and we should be looking over here. And that happens for every company that has somewhat of a consideration phase. And most companies have more of a consideration phase than they realize. Every company says, oh, our data says that. They find out about us, and then 7 days later or 6 days later or 3 days later, they convert. It's like, no, that's not the case. They've been thinking about you. They've known about you for months. And so 9 out of 10 times they're looking at click-based data, and that's wrong. They need to be looking at the full picture of attribution, which is looking at click-based, which is UTM data, or your AppsFire, Adjust, Kachava, Singular, right? You also need to be looking at media mix model. Those are 2 different views. You need to be looking at platform reported data, and you need to be looking at your How Did You Hear About Us survey. And what I say is today, I love the movie Maverick or Top Gun. Yeah. There's a great scene in the movie where in the very beginning of the movie, the commander comes in. He says, like, the days of people like you, and he's talking to Tom Cruise, like, are over. There's drones are taking over. He's like, and he said his great line in the movie, he says, maybe, but not yet. And so, and then he walks out, and he's being called out to Top Gun to train the new set of flight pilots. They're going to go do this mission that they couldn't do with drones. And it's about the pilot, not the actual technology. And I think we're in this stage for the next 3 to 5 years where it is about the pilot, and that pilot's ability to look at all the different gauges, which is all the different attribution types, and be able to optimize the spend based on the different attribution types to maximize the value and the scale for the company is still needed, because AI hasn't gotten there yet to be able to look at all those different views and be able to triangulate what's actually happening.
I interviewed you for Forbes. I've done articles. We've done podcasts. Our paths cross, Thomas, which I enjoy. What is a headline that you want to be writing about your own journey a year from now?
My hope, is that everyone that I have the opportunity to work with, and interact with on any given day, whether it's, friends, family, or colleagues, or, partners that I'm working with, or clients. My hope is that I'm able to make their life, leave them better than if they didn't know me. So whether it's the company's doing better, or they're having a better relationship with their friends or family because they spent some time with me, I would say that I'm at a point in my stage in my career, my life, where that's probably the most important thing for me, is that I'm making sure that I'm leaving a positive impact on the people that I work with.
Well, that's perfect, because couldn't hope for a better way to end it, because you've left a positive impact here, Thomas. I think there's so much here. I'm hoping that you're capturing it along the way, because you are writing a different playbook. Perception playbook is very powerful, because we know it's about we always knew it was about the user, be that B2B or B2C, but we also know it's about the creative, and we also know that's our lever. And we know from you, very inspiring, hey, maybe we'll be replaced or augmented by AI, but it's not just yet. So we have to up our game as well. And someone to learn from, it's certainly you, Thomas. Thanks so much for being here and for sharing what you know.
Thank you, Peggy. It's an absolute pleasure.
And of course, if you're tuning into In the Groove on YouTube, well, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. It will allow you to stay up to date with the series. And not only that, enjoy the pure gold of knowledge and insights our guests bring to every episode.